Love and mercy are available to all who ask. This simple idea, in the Declaration Fiducia Supplicans, split the faithful into two camps. Some saw it as a long-awaited manifestation of pastoral care. Others, on the contrary, a retreat from age-old foundations. The Declaration, love and mercy are available to all who ask. This simple idea, embedded in the Declaration Fiducia Supplicans, split the faithful into two camps. Some saw it as a long-awaited manifestation of pastoral care. Others, on the contrary, saw a retreat from age-old foundations. The document itself is precise. It does not alter the Church's doctrine on marriage. Marriage remains a sacred, indissoluble union between a man and a woman. This point is repeated, underlined with theological weight. What the Declaration permits is something different. It is a gesture of closeness. A priest can now offer a spontaneous, pastoral blessing to couples in so-called irregular situations. This includes same-sex couples. The text draws a sharp line. This is not a liturgical blessing, not a part of a formal rite. It cannot resemble a wedding ceremony in any way. No white dresses, no exchange of rings, no blessing inside a church during a service. The blessing should be brief, a matter of seconds. A simple prayer for God's grace upon people who request it. The document, issued by the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, was approved by Pope Francis. It was signed on December 18, 2023. Its purpose was to offer a concrete sign of the Church's welcome, a way to show that even those who do not live according to the Church's full teaching are not beyond God's love. They too can ask for strength to follow His will. The Declaration became an answer to years of debate among bishops and theologians. It tried to find a path between doctrinal integrity and pastoral compassion, delight and acceptance. The news spread not like a formal edict, but like a whispered message of hope. In the United States, phone lines buzzed. Social media feeds filled with expressions of stunned joy. Father James Martin, a prominent Jesuit priest known for his outreach, called the Declaration a major step forward. He described it as the Church's response to the deep desire of many Catholic same-sex couples to feel God's presence in their loving commitment. In cities from New York to San Francisco, small, informal gatherings took place. People cried, they held hands, they felt seen after decades of living in the shadows of the institution they loved. In Mexico, the reaction was similarly heartfelt. Bishops in major dioceses issued statements of support, emphasizing the pastoral nature of the document. They instructed their priests to welcome all who came seeking a blessing with open hearts. A couple from Guadalajara, Marco and Antonio, who had been together for 15 years, went to their local parish. They approached their priest after Mass, their hands trembling slightly. The priest, an older man with kind eyes, did not hesitate. He led them to a quiet corner of the church garden. He laid his hands on their shoulders and said a simple prayer. He asked for God's grace to give them strength and peace. Marco later described the feeling. It was not a grand ceremony. It was a moment of profound quiet. A weight he did not realize he was carrying had lifted. His shoulders felt lighter. The air itself seemed easier to breathe. In Brazil, the Conference of Bishops welcomed the Pope's decision as an act of mercy. They saw it as an invitation to dialogue, not division. Parishes in Rio de Janeiro and São Paulo reported an immediate influx of couples asking for the blessing. The moments were intimate, away from the main altar. A quiet word, a gentle touch. It was a recognition not of a marriage, but of a shared human journey toward God. A schism in Europe. While parts of the world celebrated, a cold front of resistance moved across Europe. The Declaration did not unify. It exposed deep, painful fractures. In Poland, the Bishops' Conference issued a swift and unyielding response. They stated that practicing blessings for same-sex couples was inadmissible in their country. The statement was blunt. It spoke of avoiding scandal and confusion. Priests were reminded that any gesture suggesting approval of such unions was forbidden. The air in Polish churches grew thick with unspoken tension. Sermons focused heavily on the sanctity of traditional marriage, the words hanging like a judgment. In Hungary, the government, a self-proclaimed defender of Christian values, remained silent. But the sentiment among the nation's conservative Catholic leadership was clear. They viewed the declaration as a dangerous concession to secular pressures, a betrayal of sacred doctrine. The division was not just between nations. It ran through individual countries, dioceses, and even parishes. The Catholic Church in Germany was already a landscape of deep conflict because of its own synodal way, a reform process pushing for significant changes. For the progressives, the Vatican's declaration was a timid step. It was too little, too late. They wanted full sacramental recognition. For the conservatives, it was a confirmation of their worst fears, a sign that the leadership in Rome was losing its way. A priest in a Bavarian village felt the pressure physically, a tightness in his chest. He had parishioners who had sons and daughters in same-sex relationships. They looked at him with pleading eyes. He also had powerful traditional families who funded the church repairs. Their faces were stone. They saw any deviation as a path to ruin. In France and Spain, the reaction was more muted but equally divided. Bishops issued carefully worded statements, trying to calm both sides. They emphasized obedience to the Pope while simultaneously reaffirming the traditional definition of marriage. It was a tightrope walk, a verbal dance intended to prevent an open rebellion. The result was a quiet, simmering conflict. Parishioners who once shared coffee after Sunday service now avoided eye contact. The question of the blessing became a silent litmus test of one's faith, one's loyalty, one's place in the community. The African front. If Europe was a land of fractures, Africa presented a solid, unbroken wall of opposition. The response from the continent was not a collection of individual opinions. It was a unified, thunderous roar of refusal. The Symposium of Episcopal Conferences of Africa and Madagascar, a body representing the entire continent, issued a consolidated statement in early January 2024. The message was unequivocal. There would be no blessings for same-sex couples in Africa. Their reasoning was direct, rooted in the specific cultural and social realities of their flocks. To bless such a union, they argued, would cause a scandal of immense proportions. It would create a confusion that would be impossible to manage. In many African cultures, the concept of a same-sex union is not just a theological issue. It is a deep cultural taboo, often reinforced by law. The bishops explained that their faithful would not be able to distinguish between a pastoral blessing and a liturgical one. The gesture, intended by Rome to be one of mercy, would be perceived as a formal validation of a sinful lifestyle. It was, in their view, pastorally irresponsible for their specific context. The statement was a remarkable display of continental unity. It was not a hesitant suggestion. It was a firm decision. One could almost feel the physical sensation of a door being closed, quietly but definitively. It was a collective act of protection, as they saw it, for their community's faith and moral stability. Yet, the document was crafted with careful diplomacy. The African bishops did not declare rebellion. They went to great lengths to reaffirm their unwavering communion with Pope Francis. They expressed their loyalty and obedience. Their refusal was framed not as an act of schism, but as a necessary pastoral discernment for their own people. It was an assertion of their authority to interpret Vatican directives according to local needs. They were essentially telling Rome that while they shared the same faith, their world was different. The African response demonstrated a powerful truth. The Catholic Church is not a monolith. It is a global body living in vastly different realities. A gesture of welcome in one place could be a source of profound conflict in another. The Eastern Bastion. The tremors from the declaration reached the ancient heartlands of Eastern Christianity. Here, the reaction was not one of internal debate, but of external judgment. The theological chasm between the Catholic West and the Orthodox East seemed to widen. The Russian Orthodox Church, through its Synodal Biblical Theological Commission, delivered a detailed and severe analysis. Their verdict was unambiguous. The Vatican's declaration represented a significant deviation from Christian moral teaching. The Commission's document read like a scholarly refutation. It dismantled the Vatican's distinction between liturgical and pastoral blessings. From the Orthodox perspective, any blessing is an invocation of God's approval. To bless a union that the Church considers contrary to God's law is a contradiction in terms. It is an act that undermines the very foundation of Christian anthropology and ethics. Their analysis was not just a simple condemnation. It was a lament, a statement of profound disappointment that the Roman Church had moved further away from the shared tradition of the first millennium. The response carried the weight of centuries of theological disagreement, a feeling of a bridge, once perhaps under slow repair, being damaged once more. A more complex and delicate reaction came from within the Catholic fold itself. The Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, one of the largest Eastern Catholic churches in full communion with Rome, found itself in a difficult position. Its head, Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk, issued a pastoral letter. He stated that the Declaration Fiducia Supplicans applied only to the Latin Church. It had no legal force, he declared, on the territory of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. He explained that his church has its own distinct canonical, liturgical, and spiritual heritage. The concept of a non-liturgical pastoral blessing simply did not exist in their tradition. The statement was a masterful act of ecclesiastical diplomacy. It affirmed loyalty to the Pope while simultaneously ring-fencing his community from a directive they could not accept. It was a reminder that the Catholic Church is a communion of churches, not a single, uniform entity. The Eastern lung, as it is sometimes called, breathes a different air, consequences, and the future. The declaration did not settle a question. It opened a floodgate. The weeks that followed December 18th were a chaotic swirl of conflicting statements, pastoral letters, and media headlines. The Vatican was forced to perform a rare act of damage control. In early January of 2024, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith issued a press release. It was a clarification of the clarification. The document pleaded for a calm pastoral reading. It reiterated that the blessings were not a validation. They were to be a matter of seconds, it stressed. A brief, spontaneous prayer, not a heresy. The attempt to soothe the situation had mixed results. For some, it was a necessary reassurance. For others, it was a sign of weakness. A tacit admission that the original document had been poorly conceived and had sown division instead of unity. The long-term consequences are a heavy, unwritten page. Is this the beginning of a genuine doctrinal development, a slow, painful unfolding of the Church's understanding of mercy and welcome? Or is it a fatal compromise, a crack in the dam of tradition that will eventually lead to a full rupture? The Church is now a body pulled by two opposing forces. One force is the immense gravitational pull of 2,000 years of history, doctrine, and sacred tradition. It is a force of stability and permanence. The other force is the relentless pressure of a changing world, a world where concepts of love, identity, and justice are being radically redefined. This is a force of pastoral urgency, a desire to meet people where they are. The tension between these two forces is now palpable. It is felt in the Vatican offices, in the bishops' conferences, and in the pews of every parish. And it all comes down to a single, human moment. A quiet evening in a small town. A parish priest, Father Michael, finishes his nightly prayers. The church is dark and silent. He hears a soft knock on the rectory door. He opens it. Two men stand on the doorstep. They are young. They are nervous. Their hands are clasped together, a knot of fingers in the cold night air. They look at him, their eyes full of a fragile, unspoken question. Father Michael looks at their faces. He sees their hope. He sees their fear. He looks down at their joined hands. The entire global conflict, the weight of encyclicals and synods, the joy of Mexico and the anger of Africa, it all disappears. It condenses into this one, silent space between him and the two souls standing before him. The world holds its breath. He has to make a choice.